Welcome. The topic for today is lighting the menorah with what? What type of substances can we use to light the Chanukah menorah? The first creation in the world was light. When we learn the Chumash, when we learn the Torah, starting from Bereshis, we see Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, and God said there shall be light. The great commentator Rashi, who lived over 800 years ago, cites a reference to the Talmud in Chagiga 12a. Amar Rabbi Elazar, the great Tanaic sage, Rabbi Elazar said, Or shebora HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'yom rishon, the light that God created on the first day, Adam tzofe boy misof ha'olam v'ad sofoy. Adam tzofe bo misof ha'olam v'ad sofo. A person could literally view through that light from one end of the world to the other. He could see what would take place almost from the beginning of history till the end. Ra'ah she'eino kedai le'ishtamesh bo resha'im. Ra'ah she'eino kedai le'ishtamesh bo resha'im. God saw that it wasn't worthwhile, it wasn't appropriate for this light to be used by the wicked, by those who have bad intentions. V'hivdilo le'tzadikim le'osid lovay. V'hivdilo le'tzadikim le'atid lavo. And Hashem set aside that special light for the righteous in the future. We see from here a whole different understanding of the Chumash. When we learn the Chumash initially, we think on the first day, God created light. Okay, it's probably similar to the light that we have. We have light from the source of the sun. But comes Rashi, in the name of Chazal, in the name of the great sages, and he shows us a deeper insight. He notifies us that the greatness of light wasn't only included in the fact that it's physical light for us and that we could see where to get around. The greatness of light is ultimately the understanding and clarity that we can have of the lives that we live. The first light that God created was figurative. That means it was light in the sense that everything was clear, everything was understood. Man would have the ability to understand everything that was happening to him in life. That was what took place by the first man. By the first man, Adam HaRishon, he would be able to see from the beginning of history till the end. Said God, but this is not going to work out well, because since I know that there are going to be people, descendants of the first man, who are going to be wicked, if they have access to this information, if they could know what's going to take place, they'll use it for their bad intentions. That would make things a lot worse. And so therefore, better just to hide that light. And so even though we have physical light today, but the greater portion, the portion of that light that gives a person clarity and understanding, that gives us understanding even of our own lives, is now hidden. God hid it for the righteous in the future, for the time in the future where there's only going to be good. There's only going to be beauty. There's only going to be an understanding of God's wisdom in life. Then we'll have access to that special light again. We won't have to look forward. Maybe by then we'll be looking backwards. We'll be able to understand what went on in history, why things happened the way they happened. Most importantly, we'll be able to understand what went on in our own lives. We'll be able to understand why things happened the way that they happened, even though nowadays it seems so dark and confusing for us at certain times. Why is this so important? Because in our journey through life, as Jewish people who are keeping God's will, we don't always understand why things take place the way they take place. Why do some people have all of their needs fit and others go through suffering? Why do some have riches and others have poverty? Why are some healthy and others are not? We don't always understand God's ways. The light of understanding, the Or HaGunas, is hidden. But here's the great surprise that's waiting for us that God has given us. God has given us a gift, and He says the following: one time a year, I'm going to give you access to that light. That one time a year is Chanukah. Why? On Chanukah, we all know the story that the Jewish people of the time were faced with incorporating in their life total physicality. The desire of the nations around them at the time was that Jewish people should incorporate physicality almost to a total extent in their lives. They should eliminate the spiritual aspect of their lives. Jewish people clearly were in no way willing to do this. Specifically, the ones who set out to fight against this were the Maccabim. The great Maccabim who fought against their oppressors were willing to give up their life for what they believed in. They put their lives on the line, and some of them actually lost their lives in order to reinstitute the reality of spirituality for the Jewish people to the end of generations. Once the war was over, said God, "You did this for me. That's what you did? You were willing to give up your life just to show the truth of spirituality? Just to want to worship me? I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to give you a gift, that special light that I created on the first day. Remember that light that I put away for the end of days? I'm going to give you now as a gift each and every year. Each and every year, when the days of Chanukah come around, I'm going to give each Jewish person that special experience of a little bit of that light. It's not going to be with the same intensity as the future, where you'll be able to understand everything, but to a certain extent, it will light up the darkness. And so each and every year, when the days of Chanukah come around, God gives us a special experience that we don't have on any of the other days of the year. God gives us access to that special light, the Or HaGunas, that He created already on the first day of creation. And so when we come to that special activity, when we come to that special time, and we can light the lights of Chanukah, when we light the lights of the Menorah, in one way, in one sense, we're lighting a few candles down here in the world. How much light can a candle give you? But in a greater sense, on a deeper level, what we're really doing is paralleling an experience that's going on above. There's a real spiritual experience that's coming down at the time that we light the candles. When we light a physical candle down here, it parallels the spiritual light that God brings down for each and every one of us to understand our reality. This idea was hit home by the great leader and posik, the Chaimowitz. Chaimowitz lived approximately 80 years ago during the time of World War I in Europe. And he said an amazing parable to allow a person to understand really what goes on in those dark times in life. He said the following: imagine a person comes as a guest to a city. He comes to the city and he's visiting, and he's there for Shabbos, he's there for Shabbat, and he goes to shul. He's sitting toward the front, which is customarily called the Mizrach side or the east side of the shul. And he's very excited because he knows that the custom among Jewish people is that they give an aliyah. They call up to the Torah reading the person who's a guest. And being that he's a guest, he's just waiting to get that special calling to the Torah when it comes the time. And so he's sitting in his place. Finally, it comes the time to read the Torah portion. And as we know, we call up 7 people to the Torah every Shabbos. And the person who's doing the calling up, the Rabbi, well, first he calls one person from the north side. Then he calls no one from the east side. Then he calls another 4 people from the south side and another 2 people from the west. This makes no sense. The guest can't contain himself. He doesn't understand what happened. Usually you give a guest, you give guests that respect. What happened? And he goes over after they finish the prayers, after the davening, he goes over to the Rabbi and he says, "What is this? You are so unfair. What did you do just now? You went and you called one person from the north, you called 4 people from the south, you called 2 people from the west. He didn't even call anyone from the east, where I was sitting. What are you doing?" And the Rabbi looked at him and he answered him, "With all due respect, sir, you only came for one Shabbos. You're just here for a little bit of the time. You don't know how it goes in this community for the whole year. At the beginning of the year, we sit down and we compute exactly who should get called to the Torah so that everyone in this community is called up during the entire year. You came on a Shabbos where one person was called from the north, 4 people from the south, but you don't realize that last week 4 people were called from the east and the rest of the people from the west. It's all computed exactly. If you would be here for the whole year, then you would see how fair it is and how just it is." Said the great Chafetz Chaim, it's the same thing in our lives. We come into life in only a small portion of history. We come back to God and we say, "But I don't understand. I want to understand your ways. How could you do this? How could you give one person this and one person this? Is so unfair." Says God, "You know what? If you were here from the beginning, it wouldn't be a problem. You'd be able to see how everything is computed exactly. The problem is that you weren't here from the beginning. You only come in a small sector. You only come in a small section. So to you it looks like this is right, this is wrong. When you'll be able to see the light, when you'll be able to understand what has gone on from the beginning till the end, then you'll see how everything was done exactly." And so that's the special light that shines for us each and every year on the days of Chanukah. So what we want to discuss today is what substances should we use for those lights. True, the light that we light parallels a great spiritual light that comes down, but technically we need to light a physical light. What type of substances should we use or can we use that parallel that physical light? So what the rabbis tell us, the great poskim, is that there are 3 levels of substances that we can use in order to light the lights. The first level is that a person should use wicks specifically that burn well from cotton. Cotton makes a very nice flame, and specifically olive oil. Why is that preferable? Because the Menorah represents the great lights that were lit in the time of the temple. Those lights that were lit in the temple were used with such wicks that lit very beautifully and brightly, and together specifically with olive oil. So if a person today could make the wicks out of cotton and use olive oil, that's preferable to all the other substances. But if a person doesn't have that ability, so then the second level, that's also considered praiseworthy, is to use any type of substance that will give a nice type of light. It will burn brightly. And what's brought down the poskim is that could be a wax candle. Today we have paraffin candles. Generally the type of candles that we use today are all fine because they make a very nice and bright light. But here's the thing, it can only be one candle. The halacha requires that what we light on Chanukah should only be one candle, not 2 wicks together. 2 wicks is already considered a torch. So whatever candle you take, wax, paraffin, 1 candle, we can be yoy to the mitzvah of lighting the lights of Chanukah each and every night. The third level is, if a person is somewhere where he doesn't have access to a nice light, to a good candle, you're really allowed to use any wicks. So anything that you have that would be a wick, or anything that you have that could be a substance that's combustible, would be appropriate to use for the Chanukah candles. In addition, the menorah that a person makes, the way that a person stands the candles should preferably be beautiful. Just like by all the mitzvahs. We have a rule that we should try to beautify the mitzvahs. Make a beautiful Sefer Torah. Have a beautiful lulav and esrog. Do things beautifully in the shul. Similarly, what more beautiful we can make the menorah is praiseworthy. But a person can fulfill their obligation however they light the candles, with whatever substances, because all the lights are kosher for lighting the lights of Chanukah. May God help. And we merit that as we light those physical lights, we be able to parallel the great spiritual light that we know is coming down each and every night of Chanukah. That we merit to tap in, even once a year, to that special light of understanding that comes down, that can brighten our lives, that can give us a little more strength in understanding that whatever has taken place had a purpose. It has a goal. It all makes sense in some way. And maybe we're able to use that not only to shine in our personal lives, but to shine in the lives of all of Jewish people and the whole world, to remove the darkness with the bright light of the clarity of God's wisdom in creation, speedily in our days.